Greetings and welcome to a new episode of Mobility Conversations. The electric vehicle market is starting to take off in many Southeast Asian countries, with automakers from Japan, South Korea, China, as well as Europe to start production in some of these Southeast Asian countries this year. To speak more about these developments and to give us an insight into the Southeast Asian markets as well as India, we have with us today Hirotaka Uchida. He's the principal and head of Arthur D. Little's automotive practice in Southeast Asia region, with over 14 years of experience, having 9 years of experience in Asia Pacific region, covering Thailand, Singapore, and China. He has extensive experience in existing and new business strategy, regional R&D strategy, implementation of for automotive, mobility, manufacturing, and logistics service. Our second guest today is Mr. Akshay Prasad. He's a management consultant and the senior engagement manager with over 8 years of experience of having advised in Southeast Asia, APAC, and USA on electromobility strategy. His experience ranges from growth strategy, market entry, competitive benchmarking, and commercial due diligence with specialization in new services. Gentlemen, welcome to Mobility Outlook. Delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dipanshu.
Thank you.
So we'll start off with you, Akshay. The first question is, how would you define the EV evolution in Southeast Asia, and how is it different from India?
Okay, I think that's a good question, Dipanshu. I think there are two facets to it. I personally believe that the kick-starting of the journey has been a lot similar if you compare both India and Southeast Asia. What I mean by that is the following: both markets are quite a dominant two-wheeler market, right? And you do have a good amount of presence of B2B segment, right? And actually that is the segment from a TCO perspective where electromobility makes sense. So I think from that aspect there is a lot of similarity with both markets. The other is also that if you see both countries, of course excluding Singapore, they are mostly in the middle income category, right? Which essentially means that if you look at the EV journey from, say, developed markets, or namely Europe, it started off with a demand side focus, right? But because these two countries are sort of middle income countries, the focus is less on the demand side, more on the supply side. So they are trying to actually incentivize production of say EV rather than just handing out subsidy to the customer. So I think from those aspects, I would say they are quite similar. Where I would probably say Southeast Asia is slightly different is perhaps on 2 points. One, I would probably say that in India, I think much of the EV push came or comes from the startup ecosystem, whereas in Southeast Asia, you don't really see that. In Southeast Asia, it's very much led by the state-owned enterprises who are actually having an end-to-end integrated play. And I think probably the second aspect where I would say is that India started off, India started off with, say, EV journey in 2014, 2015, 2016, where I think still EV was finding its foot in the door. But now I think when Southeast Asia is coming on the forefront, you do have things like carbon neutrality or net zero targets which have been announced. So there is a global consensus to push EV very much so. So I think that is helping the Southeast Asia countries, which I think in the case of India was not there.
Interesting you say that, Akshay. Hiro-san, I'll come to you. Based on your experience in the region, what are some of the key enablers for mass adoption of EVs?
Yeah, I can say that from the demand side and the supply side perspective. The firstly, the demand side perspective. I think the two biggest points there. The first one is the incentive on the consumer side. I mean, the customer of B2C or B2B. It obviously in other regions like China or Europe or even hybrid in Japan, all of the demand coming because of the incentive for the customer side. Yeah, that's quite powerful and the key reason to develop the new market like EV. And the other factor is the charging infrastructure. obviously the BEV, the for EV needs the infrastructure of charging station on behalf of the petrol or chem gas station. So that's the also critical factor and the key concern of customer right now who are using the ICE vehicle. Yeah, that's the second big point in demand side. And the supply side perspective, I would say the first one is obviously demand, because supply side, especially in Southeast Asia, most of the OEMs are not local players. The players from outside, like Japanese OEM, Korean, Chinese. So they, essentially speaking, essentially perspective, they don't need to launch manufacturing plant in Southeast Asia unless there are sizable demand in the region. So obviously, those foreign OEMs always think about the domestic or regional demand. So yeah, that's the first point. And the other point is also the incentive to launch a manufacturing plant and encourage EV parts import. That's what actually the Southeast Asia countries used to do. When Thailand launched the automotive industry, they reduced the import tax or some favorable incentives to boost the local demand first, and invite the foreign OEMs from outside, and then they shift their incentive on manufacturing to let them maintain in the country, which is Thailand. So that's how Southeast Asia countries launch and establish the automotive industry. So the same or similar thing is things are necessary to launch the EV market in Southeast Asia.
Okay. Interesting. Akshay, any inputs from you on this particular aspect, considering what we see in India currently?
Yeah, I think it's a great point that Hiro-san has mentioned. One thing that I would like to add a little bit, and we can go deeper on it as necessary, that the Southeast Asia countries can learn from India on some of the charging infrastructure models or deployments. Because one thing I will tell you, because the region is relatively smaller compared to India, there is a lot of collaboration that happens with other parts of the market, right? Or other parts of the world, like with Australia and things like that. So you could actually get a lot of learnings of different business models that are possible in the charging infrastructure space, something which I believe at this point in time, the Southeast Asia market is not focusing on.
Okay, interesting. Akshay, which are the subsectors within the EV ecosystem that are witnessing the most traction in Southeast Asian market?
Okay, that's, I think, quite that's something which we have been trying to identify for a lot of our clients. But to simplistically put, for your viewers, Dipanshu, if we just classify the EV value chain into, say, 3 buckets, right? Upstream, midstream, and downstream, right? Upstream, I'm referring to the entire battery and battery infrastructure. Midstream, I'm referring to the EV manufacturing, and then downstream, I'm referring to things like charging infrastructure and, of course, second use of battery and things like that. Now, where I would say the maximum activity is happening, honestly, is really in the upstream and in the midstream segment. In the upstream segment, like I told you, and even Hiro-san also mentioned, that they're trying to develop the supply base, right? Because they cannot afford to hand out doles or hand out subsidies the way the developed markets have been giving. And this is something which I think India probably realized a little late, and you may be aware with the FAME 1 and then FAME 2 coming in, and now the PLI is coming in. But this is where I think Southeast Asia has the luxury of the 2020 vision, right, where you can actually just look in hindsight and try to learn from others. So they are trying to prioritize, say, cell manufacturing and cell development. You do have some of the SOEs and conglomerates that are partnering. For instance, companies like PTT and Foxconn are partnering. In Indonesia, you actually have something called an IBC, which is an Indonesia Battery Consortium, which is a JV between 4 SOEs and LG and CATL. And then, of course, in the midstream segment as well, where you have companies like Form or PTT or SAIC for that matter that is launching. But I think on the downstream side, right, where you're talking really about charging infrastructure, or for that matter, battery management or second life use of battery, that's where I think not much is happening, honestly, because I think it has to reach a certain threshold before companies start thinking. But that is what we would want our clients to think, and even players who want to win in this market to think, because as Hiro-san mentioned, that is really a key enabler.
Right. Key enablers, Hiro-san, when we look at these opportunities, for sure, there are also some pressing challenges for players in the EV ecosystem in the region. Could you give us some insight into these sort of challenges that players face in this region?
Okay, so yeah, this is also related to demand. Sorry. Yeah, compared to other market, I mean, EV developing advanced country like Europe and China, the key different things are, the first one is the insufficient incentive on demand side. This is very critical and big gap against Europe and China. Yeah, because they Europe obviously the most of the customer can buy the vehicle by themselves. So no issue to incentivize the demand side, which is customer side. But I heard from expert in India that India is quite difficult to incentivize that demand side, because the customer who can buy the vehicle is quite limited, and that's not allowed or get aligned with the most of the nationwide people. So the similar thing is happening in Southeast Asia, and also the government is not so rich to have such kind of big incentive on the demand side. That's the first thing. And the other thing is that again, for example, China, they put the compulsory regulation or ban to enter the city center unless it's EV. So that kind of quite strong regulation or compulsory type of regulation, sharply promoted the EV demand in such a country. So that's the challenge and insufficient points that Southeast Asia has.
Okay. Interesting. Akshay, I mean, you did talk about this a little while back, but what could be the lessons that Southeast Asia can learn from India and vice versa? I mean, particularly, you did mention about the startup ecosystem in the country. So what would be your insights?
I think, so as far as the Southeast Asia market is concerned, right, I believe that they have not been promoting a lot of startups in the electromobility space. I mean, we are also coming up with a EV report for the Thailand market, and then subsequently for other countries. And we learned that in India, there are about 500 to 600 recognized startups, whereas similar number in the entire Southeast Asia is less than 50 or less than 75. And I'm talking about domiciled headquarters here, right? So I think that is something that probably Southeast Asia can learn from India, because why this is important is that in electromobility space, right, there will be different user that will come in, there'll be different use cases, and as a result of which there'll be new types of business models that can come about, right? And the startup helps in sort of creating that vibration in the market. Plus, it also helps customer awareness, and plus with the current sort of valuations that you can expect, you do see a lot of investment also coming in, which typically, let's say, a conventional investor like the banks and all would not do, right? So one, of course, will be doing that push. If I talk about India, I think what India can perhaps learn is maybe the integrated role that some of the SOEs are playing in the Southeast Asia market. Some of the SOEs actually are just not entering one part of the value chain, but they are entering and looking to do everything that is possible under the umbrella. I don't really recall any SOE doing that. Yes, of course, there are conglomerates like the Tata groups that are into different businesses, but again, then I don't know whether how that is coming as an overall ecosystem. Plus, of course, the impact will also be quite limited because at the end of the day, they are profit driven, right? So I think those are probably one points that each of them can learn. Interestingly, though, although I would say that they could also learn from one another on the different battery technologies that one is coming about, because another similarity now that I'm thinking out loud is that both of these regions are devoid of the lithium battery reserve, right? And I think both regions want to de-risk from China. So if you look at it this way, India is moving towards alternate technologies like hydrogen, solid state, sodium ion, whereas Thailand is moving more towards zinc oxide because they have sufficient zinc. So I think they should probably learn to collaborate, and how that can be unlocked, maybe declaring some of these technologies as priority sectors so that funds could come from the banks and other institutional investors, is something that both parties could learn.
Very important point, Akshay. I mean, you did talk about collaboration, and that is something that I'd like to, ask Hiro-san. What are some of these collaborative opportunities between India and Southeast Asian nations, or between EV players in these areas, Hiro-san?
That's slightly different up to the country in Southeast Asia. For example, the collaboration with Indonesia, obviously they are trying to build the lithium battery entire supply chain in Indonesia. So yeah, in that sense, with the Indonesia and India, they can collaborate to build the deep battery supply chain. Obviously the Indonesia is focusing on upstream side, and India prioritized to import the deep battery cell, for example, from Indonesia. To reduce the total cost and boost the EV competitiveness. Such kind of collaboration can be taken with Indonesia. But the collaboration with Thailand is a bit different because, as Akshay mentioned, both of the countries in India and Thailand don't have the raw material for deep battery, so they can collaborate to build the first one is the deep battery recycling ecosystem to get the raw material from the used battery and keep it in the country to secure the raw material. That's the one collaboration area, and the other one is to build or study the new generation battery technology rather than deep lithium-ion battery, which is for example the zinc ion or sodium ion, such kind of battery, because they means the both of the India and Thailand really want to have the new innovation in battery space to lead the battery manufacturing and entire supply chain. That kind of collaboration can be taken.
Okay.
And if I could just add, Dipanshu, I think there could also be a bit of collaboration on the different charging infrastructure or battery swapping models, because both these countries, right? I mean, if you look at like I said in my first answer, that B2B segment is really going to be the first adopter anyways, right? And you do see a good amount of battery swapping solution that has already been deployed in India. In Indonesia, they're in some pockets. Same goes with Thailand. So maybe there could be a lot of learning for maybe the Thai or Indonesian markets, or for that matter, even other markets which are now coming to the fore, right? Like say Vietnam does not have an EV policy out yet, but then Philippines, Cambodia, those regions or markets could learn from India. And another thing which I would probably like to point out is, I know that India is doing a lot when it comes to green hydrogen, right? And I think there also there is some a collaboration that can happen with markets like Indonesia, because the electricity price is a lot cheaper. So I think the initial proof of concepts that one is trying to test for, let's say, green hydrogen that India is trying to do, it can be done on a pilot basis with Indonesian companies, given the more cheaper say energy cost.
Okay, okay. Interesting. Akshay, this would be my final question. In your view, and Hiro-san, I'll come to you as well with this question. How big is the EV opportunity for the global mobility industry in India as well as SEA? And here I'm not just talking from the perspective of products, but the
Right.
entire EV ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think if you ask me, because it's very tough to sort of give a ballpark number, so I'll probably give a range. And I think say by the turn of the decade, you can expect the EV opportunity in India to be in the range of 100 to 150 billion. And here I'm talking about EV manufacturing, I'm talking about EV battery, and I'm talking about, say, downstream charging infrastructure services, right? And I would say probably the split, if I have to give it, would definitely be 30 to 40% in say the battery play, another 30% I would say in the EV manufacturing space, and of course the rest of it will be in the downstream. And I think that is the segment that will grow a lot more, because it's more like repeat use, right? Once you have the stock of EVs, then you of course are using the charging infrastructure over and over again, right? If I talk about Southeast Asia, I think our estimates is around, I would say, 10 to 20 billion, because the market is a lot smaller. Plus, one still is not very clear how much would be the adoption rate. I think in India, still you have market evidence to tell you that, okay, ballpark, these are the kind of adoption that you can expect. In Southeast Asia as a region, it is still yet to be determined, because other markets are still coming out with their EV policies and things like that. So it's difficult to make that assessment.
Right. Hiro-san, any final comments on that?
Yeah, that's quite makes sense. And the reason behind is that as a whole, automotive market in India and Southeast Asia, the total size is quite similar, almost 4 million in terms of the four-wheeler sales in India and Southeast Asia. But the adoption rate of EV is slightly different. As Akshay mentioned, we expect the adoption rate of EV in Southeast Asia is less than that in India. The one of the big reason is that India has the local player OEMs like Tata, Mahindra. Those players promote themselves to adopt EV and make the market by themselves. That's biggest advantage against Southeast Asia country. So that's why we expect that the adoption rate in Southeast Asia is less than India.
Okay.
And I think that's a great point that Hiro-san mentioned. Now that I'm also thinking, another thing which I can now sort of put into perspective is that if you look at in Southeast Asia, you do not have a lot of the major global charging infra companies, right? Like I remember when 2016, 2017, the first sort of EV wave started. That time, you already had companies like ChargePoint, ABB, Fortum in the market, right? Whereas in Southeast Asia, I think besides ABB, from a global perspective, there's no other major player that I could recall. So I think that also sort of would further delay, because the local companies, right, they don't have that much of deep pockets to keep, because end of the day, again, charging infra business needs to be sort of a profitable business, right? And of course, the local companies will have much smaller break-even periods or stringent ROI concerns compared to maybe the global firms. So I think that also sort of adds to our overall consensus that the EV adoption will be slower in Southeast Asia.
But the last point I want to add is that, that also depends on how the local companies, local conglomerate SOE can catch up to this EV manufacturing or the upstream or downstream space. Because as Akshay mentioned, lots of SOEs in Southeast Asia, like PDD or Pertamina, Petronas, all are thinking to enter EV space in terms of manufacturing or infrastructure. So if they can catch up properly and quickly, the situation should be changed.
Gentlemen, wonderful talking to you, and thanks for the great insights that you've shared with us today. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, Dipanshu.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.